Nasada nakislat sa ibang nga course.
Waray choice.
Diri ko aram akong course sa college.
Why sociology be your first choice?
It is a study about the world with the goal of improving people's lives, and it develops your skills to understand everything around you. Here are the professions that you might partake as sociology graduate.
University of Eastern Philippines has the only BA Sociology program in Eastern Visayas. In UEP Sociological Society, we have faculty who support students to achieve success. We develop students who practices critical thinking and analyzation. We conduct surveys and do social experiments. We attend outside university seminars. We do not only study the social changes, we also work on it. We learn and we achieve. Make sociology your choice for a better future.
College of Arts and Communication, UEP's cradle of liberal education. Your banner we proudly wave, your motto is to live. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, truth conquers all. Refresh competence, action, commitment, as in service to others. We strive for excellence in your name. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, truth conquers all. Gratitude and loyalty we pray. God's blessings be upon you. CAC ever true to your mission. We're always our inspiration. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, conquers all. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, conquers all.
Reminder to our participants, those who will not be accommodated in Zoom, you may join us through our Facebook page, where we will be having a Facebook Live, the UEP CAC BA Sociology. The program will start in a few minutes.
Nasada nakislat sa ibang nga course.
Waray choice.
Diri ko aram akong course sa college.
Why sociology be your first choice?
It is a study about the world with the goal of improving people's lives, and it develops your skills to understand everything around you. Here are the professions that you might partake as sociology graduate.
University of Eastern Philippines has the only BA Sociology program in Eastern Visayas. In UEP Sociological Society, we have faculty who support students to achieve success. We develop students who practices critical thinking and analysis. We conduct surveys and do social experiments. We attend outside university seminars. We do not only study the social changes, we also work on it. We learn and we achieve. Make sociology your choice for a better future.
College of Arts and Communication. It is great love, liberal education. Your banner we proudly wave. Your motto is to live. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, truth conquers all. We pledge competence, action, commitment, as in service to others. We strive for excellence in your name. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, truth conquers all. Gratitude and loyalty we pray. God's blessings be upon you. CAC ever true to your mission. For always our inspiration. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, conquers all. Omnia Veritas, Vincit, conquers all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all once again to the afternoon session of this webinar themed Pagpalawod sa Katilingban, diving into the depths of community through the tenets of sociology. He discussed youth and some pointers during collect into her discussion.
Of humanitarian technology, disaster context, and understanding the power relations in humanitarian sectors and how it affects local humanitarian workers. She has also authored a piece that looked at emerging humanitarian issues in Southeast Asia in 2020. Our guest speaker has experience working with child-focused humanitarian organizations, World Vision Development Foundation, and Plan International Philippines as research specialist and monitoring and evaluation officer, respectively. She earned her master's and bachelor's degree in sociology from University of Cambridge and University of the Philippines, respectively. A recipient of the British Government Chevening Scholarship in 2018. She earned her bachelor's degree in sociology at the University of Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Let's give a round of virtual applause to our guest speaker, Ms. Pamela G. Combinido.
Hi,
And let us all welcome our speaker for this afternoon, Ms. Pamela G. Combinido. Ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction, Ricabel. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And to be with so many amazing social students. Sayang, we can't do this in person, but I am happy to be here. And today I'll be sharing with you one of the research reports that we have published after the Typhoon Haiyan response. So at the time, I was a fourth year sociology student. I was also doing my thesis at the time. And I know a lot of you are familiar with the Typhoon Haiyan experience. So I hope some of the findings resonate with you. And I am very much looking forward to your comments, your questions, any feedback. So let's start. I'll be sharing my screen. Okay. So can you see my screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the title of my presentation is Silence in the Aid Interface, and it really looks at the experience of disaster-affected communities in the Typhoon or Typhoon Yolanda response. So sobrang important ng discussion around the experiences of communities during a disaster response kasi they really have a lot of interactions with what they call outsiders. This can be private organizations, NGOs, other humanitarian organizations. And here to understand that relationship, what I'm offering is understand it from the concept of aid interface. The concept of aid interface actually borrows it from anthropology, no, or sociology of development. When you think of interface, imagine it as like that space, that those engagements where affected communities and the outsiders interact. So here the exact definition is it refers to the dynamic, variable, and really unpredictable processes and context in which the providers of aid, whether like private organizations or humanitarian organization, and those seekers of these aid interact. So, and in this interface, sobrang important siya for sociologists like us kasi you can really see how like different actors translate meanings. You can also see how their interests sometimes conflict, and also their principles are interacting with one another. So this is what we were very interested in when we were studying the concept of aid interface. But just to note that when we went in 2015 in select Typhoon Haiyan affected communities in Cebu, in Tacloban, and in Rojas City, we weren't really looking at interface per se. Parang we didn't have that that assumption at the very beginning. It was really just emerging, kumbaga, in our interactions with communities, with organizations. So we thought, okay, this is very important to understand kasi we can really see yung mga principles and interests of different actors and how they negotiate that. So parang there's that power dynamic as well, no, na hindi naman when you are in the interface, very equal yung footing ng affected communities and ng organizations. Of course, there is also power imbalance there given that communities, kumbaga, are in a place of need, they need support, they need help to recover. So that's what I mean by aid interface. I hope that's clear. And if you have any questions, just let me know. So in that paper, we were really interested to answer the question, how are humanitarian principles practiced and translated in the aid interface? So when you talk about humanitarian principles, in the humanitarian circle, they call this yung principles of impartiality. So when you go to like an affected community, you should be impartial. Or hindi ka dapat talaga ano dun sa kunyari politics in that community. You should also be neutral, and also there's this commitment to humanity and serving the most needy. So those are among the principles. So we wanted to see how that is being practiced in the aid interface. And another question we had is, how do communication platforms like social media, text messaging, etc., shape accountability and participation in the aid interface? Again, too many loaded terms. But when I say accountability, it means that parang paano ba nagagamit or paano ba nakakatulong yung kunyari yung mga communication platforms for disaster affected communities to hold these organizations into account, no, sa mga decisions nila, no? Parang hindi ito, kumbaga, yung mga actions nila dapat hindi basta-basta tinatanggap lang. There is this assumption that affected communities can challenge those decisions and those practices through the communication platform. So side note, at the time we were when we interviewed over 260 people, I think, sorry, I can't remember, this was 7 years ago, ang dami nilang practices in relation to the use of communication platforms. So makita mo rin yung intergenerational dynamics. So may mga matatanda na they prefer yung letters, may mga bagets na they prefer interacting through social media. So I'll talk about that later on. So those are the key questions that I'll answer today. So now I'd like to focus on government officials because they really, kumbaga, they shown at the time yung power nila. They were really holding so much responsibility at the time. And then at the same time, they also have that large or very large responsibility and influence dun sa outcome ng tulong na matatanggap ng community. So here, parang niliken namin sila sa Janus-like structures. And if you Google it, it's like, it's this figure na you are facing two directions at once. So parang if you are a government official, you have to face two directions. So one is the affected communities, and then the other is yung humanitarian organization. So here I'm reading the note. They must serve the interests of groups operating on both the community and national level, and they must cope with the conflicts raised by the collision of these interests. So again, when you're facing two directions, it doesn't mean that you are dealing with the same kind of interest. So kung iba yung as alam naman natin na minsan iba din talaga yung priority ng communities and iba din talaga yung priority ng outsiders. So here we were interested dun sa paano nila tinanggap yung responsibilities and burdens to broker better quantity and quality of aid for their communities. And paano rin sila nakipag-interact, nakipag-engage sa humanitarian agencies, and whether the quality of engagement is desirable from the perspective of the affected communities. So this is really based on ethnographic research, kaya sobrang matagal na pagbabad din at pag-i-interview sa iba't ibang kumbaga klase ng mga tao. Meron mga parang low income, meron mga middle class, and then high income level. And I'll later on I'll share that report para makita nyo din kung yung pagkakaiba-iba ng types of interactions ng different communities sa government officials. All right, so now we discuss the empirical evidence, kumbaga. So this is the aid interface of Typhoon Haiyan. I hope it doesn't trigger so bad memories, but let this be a space to reflect what can we learn from that experience, and ano na yung dapat natin hindi gawin moving on. So ayan, itong picture na to, you can see, thank you Oxfam from Sitio Mahayahay. We took this picture in Bantayan, Cebu. And this is parang ano siya, in the middle of a community, may parang malaking area where may maraming thank you messages nagawa sa mga shells or any local products. So here we really observed yung gratefulness ng communities dun sa tulong ng mga humanitarian organizations, whether this came in the form of shelter, support, livelihood, hygiene kits. Pero kahit thankful sila, if you listen to them intently, you would notice na sobrang thankful kami. Pero parang laging may nakasunod na pero. Dapat ganito yung ginawa nila, or dapat sinunod nila to or something. So that's what I'll discuss later on. So here we saw different types of engagements, no. Kapag nakipag-interact ang humanitarian organization sa community, hindi sila pare-pareho. So may mga communities na may mga organizations na totally dependent sa communities. Meron namang organizations na minimally dependent, and meron ding organizations na talagang independent doon sa engagement with the community, and later on I'll explain. But it's important here to note na itong types of engagements na to had an impact dun sa quality of relationship they had with the humanitarian organization, and also with the impact of the tulong na binigay dun sa social relations ng communities. So when I say totally dependent agencies or humanitarian organizations, siguro familiar sa inyo yung iba dito, no? So ito yung situations when yung barangay leaders, they would draft the beneficiary list, and then they would also distribute the aid by themselves without the help of agencies. So kumbaga iba. So okay, may tulong po kami, kayo na pong bahala. Kayo na pong bahala sa listahan. We trust you, kumbaga, na parang you will distribute this equally and fairly dun sa communities. So ito yung type of engagement na you would really see a lot of opportunities for community leaders to kind of use the aid for their own political benefits. So for example, I'll read the quote from one of our respondents. I hope that the agencies would not hire barangay workers to do the survey. Yung survey meaning ito yung survey na ginagawa nila para malaman kung sino yung tutulungan or hindi. I hope they would do it personally. Our officials are good, but they also have a family. Of course, they would prioritize them over us. So we were at the time when we were raising this recommendation sa humanitarian organizations, we were telling them that of course kailangan ng tulong, but you really have to be very reflective dun sa sa parang paano ba nakaka-impact yung tulong na yun pagdating sa political influence ng barangays. Because at that time, we had select communities within a barangay na na-exclude sila from aid because hindi yan kapartido ni barangay leader. So there was really that power dynamics at play, and we really wanted humanitarian organizations to be very wary of that. Minimally dependent naman is when they use humanitarian organizations use external evaluators. So they verify yung listahan ng barangay leader, and then yung external evaluators yung magba-validate kung tama ba yung listahan na yun. So this was really preferred by communities kasi they reduced the anxieties and yung inggitan that kasi they see external evaluators as more independent, as fair. So kumpara dun sa barangay official nila. So for example, I will quote one of our respondents who said agencies should monitor the process. So for example, they should be here distributing so that they would know if the ones who receive the help are worthy of the help. Because there is really no system here, especially kapag, di ba, pag kakabagyo lang, there is no NGO that monitors. So it is the barangay that does it all. So it was really important to have that external evaluator because nalilesen niya yung kumbaga political influence ng mga leaders, and at the same time, na-assure sila that the process is fair. Dun sa minimally independent, we observe na maraming active and principled brokers, and ito yung mga barangay leaders na very hardworking and exceptional, no? And they really champion the interest of their communities. So if the totally dependent is like, okay, tatanggapin po namin yung tulong and kami na yung bahala. Yung active and principled brokers, they would not necessarily accept yung tulong na ibibigay. They really have to take into consideration kung kasya ba yan sa lahat, kung kasya ba yan sa lahat, kasi kung hindi, mag-iinggitan lang yan. So rather than helping, you are causing further harm din sa social relations ng communities, di ba? So at the same time, they would really be active in lobbying the government, yung kunyari local government nila, to include their barangay dun sa distribution of support at the local or at the provincial level. So ito yung mga, sadly, very few, rather it's the exception rather than the norm dun sa nakita naming case sa Haiyan. But it was really important and they really played a big role in preserving community solidarity and over the material benefits of the relief aid that they receive from humanitarian organizations. So I remember this one quote from a respondent in Rojas City na parang sabi niya, most of the NGOs that coordinated our barangay are rejected by our barangay captain because they would only give to a few residents and that would cause problems, sabi niya. What people want is for everyone to receive aid. So our barangay captain would just reject aid altogether pag hindi yan yung case. So kaysa mamimili lang siya ng bibigyan at parang masasabihan pa na hindi fair, i-reject niya na lang kasi kaysa kahit na kailangan din ng community nila. So what can we learn from this? So sa side ng aid ng humanitarian organizations, and if some of you would be working in mga kunyari development or humanitarian organizations, important na i-take into consideration yung political context of the communities that you will be working with. So in many places, like in many places in the Philippines, may historical distrust of government coupled with experiences of diversion, corruption and politicization of aid to define that relationship between the government and the citizens. So hindi siya, kumbaga yung tulong is not an abstract thing. Okay, gusto kong tumulong, magbibigay ako ng tulong. But it is operating within that condition na may historical distrust ang citizens sa government nila. So for example, kung ikaw ay development or humanitarian worker and you're engaging with these government bodies or agencies, you can be seen as someone supporting poor governance, kumbaga. So that's why we were telling these organizations na you really have to take this context into consideration. Yun, so that's the main thing, no, yung importance ng deep immersion, no, sa communities. And I think this is one of the one of the how it relates dun sa theme ng webinar, na parang important talaga yung community and deep immersion for you to understand the context. So yung kanina binanggit ko yung accountability and participation, no, and important yun sa humanitarian organizations because gusto nila na yung communities have that power to influence their decisions. Kumbaga, hindi lang sila yung nakikita ng organizations na yung communities have this agency and power to participate in how aid is going to be structured, how aid is going to be distributed. So, ano yung implication niya when you do that? So, for example, if you are an accountability officer sa isang government or humanitarian organization, anong ibig sabihin nun for you, no? Ibig sabihin nun, you really have to have that skill as interface expert, no, in finding ways to prevent humanitarian aid from being captured by the elite, whether that's through yung political influence or economic influence in a community. And we saw that ito napapasok na yung communication platforms. We saw that it really played a big role in facilitating complaints and feedback. But you also have to really be considerate na hindi nakaka-capture nun lahat. No, you really have to be active in engaging communities because some of them really don't prefer yung face-to-face communications than yung text messaging or social media. So number one is the skills, and number one is suitability ng communication platform to receive yung feedback and complaints. So I think those are the implications when you look at the politicization of aid. So these are some of what I mean by yung mga mga communication platforms. For example, here they would have like this contact information na if you want to reach out to them, meron silang mga contact details. And this was taken in Leyte in the aftermath of Haiyan. And maraming iba't ibang, maraming telephone numbers. But there was also, at the time, there was an attempt to consolidate all these numbers para hindi paiba-iba. But still, it wasn't about consolidating the numbers. But it was about understanding kung nag-fit ba yung type of communication na yun doon sa context and cultural expectations ng communities, because again, they preferred face-to-face communications over yung mga text messaging. So ito, again, just some more pictures ng paano nila hinihikayat pala yung communities na makipag-interact dun sa humanitarian organizations. And really the assumption is that may karapatan yung mga disaster affected communities to be engaged doon sa kung paano i-distribute yung aid, kung paano sila babangon sa community. And that's really the overall goal din nung community engagement. Marami ng innovations in the humanitarian sector, how this can be done. Meron silang mga ini-introduce na GIS mapping tool. So parang it's a website where you can see ano yung types of feedback na na-receive in different barangays. But again, of course, that's a wonderful innovation. But what we were getting from communities is that kailangan pa rin po talaga ng face-to-face and like personal interaction, kasi that's a really good opportunity for communities to tell their stories, bakit dapat sila isama dun sa listahan ng makakatanggap ng tulong, for example, para ipagawa yung bahay nila. So that of course, those innovations are important, but again, dapat din natin i-consider yung contextual condition ng communities. This was a picture that that we took in 2018, I think. And unfortunately, at the time in Tacloban, meron pa ring transitional shelters. But maybe some of you can also share your experience dealing with humanitarian organizations. But I wanted to impart that experience to you because at the time I was a fourth year social students. But now that I'm working in the humanitarian sector, it was a very eye-opening experience, to say the least. And important siya na malaman even at this point kasi we really have to center communities in everything that we do. And sometimes we really have to be aware of those conflicting interests, whether they're coming from government agencies, the donors of the aid, or sino iba pang government officials who may be wanting to like have that visibility during a disaster. So that's my presentation. I hope that was helpful, and I'm really looking forward to your comments and questions. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, ma'am, for the very enlightening discussion. To our participants, if you have questions for the participants in the Zoom, you may send your questions through the chat box, or you may use the raise hand button. And to our participants via Facebook Live, you may drop your questions under the comment section. We will now proceed to the open forum. Eman. I think our moderator is experiencing a technical problem. Okay, to our participants, you may send your questions now through the chat box, and in the Facebook, you may send it through the comment section. Ma'am, we have a question here. We deal with the officials who prioritizes their family instead of distributing the aid fairly.
Good question. That's a really good question. And I think at a certain time you would get that experience will tell you na this official is not fitting to become the next official, because as we know, sobrang frequent ng disasters in our country. So you really have to be electing officials who are fair, who are inclusive. And if in one experience it shows you na hindi talaga siya fair, sometimes we know that our influence as citizens can be limited, no? Na parang, okay, we can complain to a higher official, but we have to consider na it might not be leading to the change that we want, but we have that election, for example, to not vote for that official again. So it's essential not to vote for that person again. So it's important that government officials are fair and very inclusive, even kahit sa outside ng disaster or yung crisis situation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions?
Good afternoon, Ma'am Pam. I would like to ask if for us, as graduating students, how can we start working in a humanitarian group, ma'am?
And again, thank you for asking. Ay, sorry, nag-echo yung voice. So if it's okay to mute, ayan. So sa humanitarian organization, they are very welcoming of students, lalo na yung recent graduates. They really, because graduates would really have that perspective after studying all these theories, they would have that fresh perspectives na parang they would tend to have that position na i-challenge nila of how things are really working. Kumbaga parang nasanay na yung yung organization sa certain practices. But I guess at a more practical level, there is this Facebook page called Philippine Development Sector Jobs. So they are always looking for social graduate development officers or yung case ko monitoring and evaluation officers. So at being M&E, yung M&E yung tawag, M&E specialist, dun ko talaga nagamit yung skills ko sa sociology, but particularly yung research skills and yung skills to be able to interact with communities and to really listen to them, to their concerns. So I would say that my background as a sociologist really helped me become be part of that humanitarian organization, that in development sector jobs. They really post a lot of job openings there. If anyone's interested, they can send a request and you can see yung mga job posts from different humanitarian organizations as well as government agencies. So
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Another question, ma'am, from Ma'am Lourdes Olmedo. What were the findings of your study, ma'am? Thank you.
That's a very big question. Ano doon? Yung is it more around like the experience of the communities or yung response ng humanitarian organizations? I guess just to sum, before you ask or answer that question, to sum it up, aid is politicized. It's important to have those interface experts who are aware of those political dynamics, because if not, aid which is supposed to help communities can be captured by elite in the community, and if that happens, it can cause one the community na affected na nga by a disaster, and then nag-aaway-away sila because of the limited aid. So that's really the main finding. You really have to immerse yourself in communities. Aid is not an abstract thing na parang it's not inherently good. You really have to be aware and immersed and engaged doon sa context ng communities. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Andet, you have a follow-up question, ma'am? Ma'am Andet? Naka-mute, ma'am. Ma'am, your audio is not on. It's not you're not audible, ma'am. Yeah.
I want to know the findings of the study experience with the community. How viewed the external disaster?
Sorry, did I capture it correctly? Now you are asking kung ano yung experience.
Yeah, was it something that they would look forward to, if only to get the help, or is it something that they need to understand why things which are not so good, what happened? in their communities.
Yeah, so nung una, they were really needing that support to recover. But at the same time, they were also expressing resentment. Parang, kumbaga, it's a very, not a black and white situation. They were very grateful, but at the same time, they want things to be better. So there we captured na hopeful, sana mas engage with the current organizations rather than leaving everything to the government official, or sana they listen to us in a better way, rather than asking us to text their complaints using the number. So it was very varied. There were those that are grateful, they want things to be done in a better way.
I have another question po from the chat box of the Zoom from Rixel Brian Buzon. What is the importance of the external evaluators to the community?
Yeah, so yung external evaluators, usually these are researchers as well. So if you want also to do like work in this space, there's an opportunity to become an external evaluator. So usually these are research agencies or firms, and they would validate the list na pre-provide ng barangay, or they would survey yung feedback and facilitating that discussion or that connection between communities and humanitarian organizations. So really play a role. And as I mentioned kanina noon, talagang when you have external evaluators, it lessens that jealousy and anxiety ng community kasi they see external evaluators as fair, they are unbiased. So that really facilitates, kumbaga parang the external evaluators would have that big responsibility, no? Kasi they would be determining or validating sino yung nakakatanggap ng tulong or ano yung tingin ng community doon sa tulong na natanggap nila.
Ms. Pam, Ma'am Odette has another has a follow-up question po. Ma'am, ano ngayon ang tingin mo bilang sociologist ang effect ng gratefulness of the Filipino communities despite resentment of some?
Okay, that's a really great question po. I think when we were writing the report, Filipinos are always have that positive, hindi naman always, but they tend to be very positive, having this positive emotions such as faithfulness. And we were drawing a lot from the patron-client framework to explain that relationship between humanitarian organization and communities. And I guess that resentment or that gratefulness is something to be proud of. I don't think that's something that we need to be ashamed of. But in that gratefulness doesn't hinder us naman to challenge how things are. Kumbaga, it can coexist with resentment and the will to like change things. Na it doesn't mean that you are grateful. You wouldn't question how things are. So we saw that they are grateful, but they also have that agency to question things, no? And I guess the message there is it's not black and white situation, but something that really influences their engagement with outsiders like humanitarian organizations, particularly yung mga international humanitarian organizations. So bring with them expats. They tend to be very parang positive around them. So yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Pam. Another question, ma'am. Kung sakali pong hindi idaan sa mga barangay official aid, sa tingin po ba ninyo lahat po ng apektado makakatanggap ng pantay na tulong?
Mm. Again, thank you for the question. No? So, ito yung isa sa mga practical challenges na na-experience namin mga humanitarian staff. Of course, when you go to like a community affected by a crisis, hindi madali yung, kumbaga hindi madali yun gawin when you don't have connections. And hindi, again, the message is not to shun away from government officials. I think that the message there is it may ganong politics inside, but you really have to, kumbaga, na parang the message is not, okay, sige, I want to help people, so ipadaan na lang natin sa iba. Again, that's not the message. We really have to recognize this local leadership, no, in the community. But we have to find a way to build that structure where everything could be fair and inclusive. And one of the ways they do that is they build a relationship with the local leader, but at the same time, they also find a way to talk to other types of leaders in the community. So hindi naman lahat ng leaders in the community are elected or hindi lahat ng trusted are elected. So parang that provides like a balance then. But again, it creates another problem. Baka sabihin sa'yo nung local leader na, don't you trust me, ganyan. So there are mechanisms really that has to be put in place to make sure that it is inclusive. So for example, they do meetings, they invite other people, for example, yung mga matatanda, mga kabataan. So again, there are structures to make it inclusive, and the message is not to parang not to recognize that local leadership, because at the end of the day, we elected them. Again, the one of the learnings there is we really have to elect officials who would respect those mechanisms to make sure na inclusive and fair yung process.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Another question, Ms. Pam. From your experience in the field, among the 3 forms of engagement, which is the most effective po, ma'am?
Oh, okay. That's again a good question. Nakalimutan kong banggitin kanina na it's also a matter of that temporal consideration. Now, when you are parang immediately after a crisis or a disaster, of course, the goal is to reach as much people as possible. So sometimes organizations, even private individuals, would go to a community and then, oh, may tulong po kami, kayo na pong bahala. And then they would try to go to another community, tas para lang mas marami silang kumbaga maabot na communities. In terms of effectiveness, and then again, thinking long term, hindi na siya after ng disaster. Kunyari, recovery phase na. Kasi when you look at disaster cycle, di ba may preparedness, may mismong immediate, and then may recovery, may rebuilding na process. When you look at recovery, sobrang important, nakita namin talaga na effective yung that humanitarian organizations are immersed. Kumbaga, they have that representation in the barangay. They are acknowledged as a partner, as supporter. And we really see that it was effective kasi they would have that opportunities to engage with them personally. At I remember nga, there was this barangay in Tacloban na there was this organization na ang tawag sa parang relations and that connectedness with the community. So again, it's that immersion is super important, but you also have to consider the temporal dimension na hindi ka naman pwedeng mag-immerse after a disaster kasi the goal is to reach as much people as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Pam, for that answer. Another follow-up question from Abundet, Ms. Pam. Based on your observations daw po, ma'am, how inclusive were the structures, sector representation?
I guess it links back to that disaster framework po, at the local level. And if that is, kumbaga, functional, and you know that even before the disaster, it is functional, then you would know that in the recovery phase, kumbaga may structure na to activate it. So if the case is that before the disaster, hindi siya functional, and siguro doon sa mga kabataan noon, parang when I'm saying disaster structure, kumbaga, meron kasi tayong batas na dapat at the local level may sectoral representation, prepare the structures na yun. At the recovery, kumbaga medyo mas madali yun, i-make sure na inclusive. Kasi even before the disaster, it was standing, it was operational na. So yeah, I think it really depends po kung gaano ka-functional yung paano nila na-translate into practice yung batas natin pagdating sa disaster. And it doesn't include pa po yung mga conflict affected. I don't have experience on that, but sa disaster, I see that it really depends po dun sa functionality nung mga structures na yun to make, paano nila tinatranslate in practice yung batas natin related to disaster preparedness and response.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Pam. Another question. Ano po ang pwedeng maiambag naming mga sociology students during calamities?
Ito na naman tayo sa discussion ng ambag. I think napakadami ng ambag na pwedeng magawa. Hindi ko ma-elaborate lahat. But I know that some of the ways that students have been actively engaging is in social media, and sharing information online. But I think I want to take this opportunity, na when you are doing that, for example, on Twitter, there are certain hashtags that are supposed to help, like the police or mga emergency rescuers and even media organization to understand what's happening on the ground. So for example, if you are a student and parang, di ba, parang nadadala ka ng emotion na you want to help, don't use that hashtag to parang tweet how you're feeling. Let's use that hashtag if you have like a specific information that could be helpful to rescuers or other communities on the ground. Siguro yun yung isa sa mga pinaka-helpful na parang madaling gawin as students. And of course, there are many opportunities to help after. Again, I'd like to take this opportunity na if you want to help, make sure na yung tulong ay hindi, kunyari, when you are donating to communities, marami ng discussions around ano yung pwedeng i-donate aside sa, kunyari, canned goods or something. Yung isa sa mga nakita namin practices talaga na hindi namin, kumbaga, ini-encourage is yung pagdodonate ng lumang damit, because it really, of course, the intention is good, but sometimes hindi talaga yun yung nakakatulong, and may mga taong nagdodonate ng hindi maayos na damit. So yun yung, I guess yung sagot ko dun sa question is more around what are some of the things not to do during a disaster, kasi there are so many opportunities to help. Pero we really have to take a step back and reflect, saan ako effective, di ba? Ano yung effective na pwedeng gawin? Bearing in mind na hindi ito about me, but it's about the communities that were affected by the disaster. So,
thank you, Ms. Pam. Another follow-up question, ma'am. From your experience, applicable po ba on the field ang lahat ng sociological perspective that are in the books?
Again, good question, no? Of course, the answer is these theories naman that we learn in sociology, first and foremost, some of them were from Western views, no? And hindi naman siya by the book na biglang itatanungin mo sa community na may agency po ba kayo or may capacity po ba kayo. Pero I guess what I am trying to say is, even though it's not by the book, makikita mo talaga yung resonance niya. And sometimes hindi lang siya yung parang kung makikita mo siya na kumbaga, marami, di ba, sa sociology na marami tayong aspirations pagdating sa kung ano dapat yung lipunan natin, ano yung dapat gawin. minsan nakakaano pa siya parang parang ano ba yan, marami kang reflections na magagawa na bakit in sociology class ganito dapat yung sinasabi nila, bakit in reality hindi siya nangyayari. So for example, yung representation na tanong ni ma'am, 'di ba parang in the book that's highly encouraged yung representation, inclusiveness. Pero in the community, parang hindi pala yun automatic, no? Or marami palang obstacles and barriers to that. But one thing that I am very parang very thankful sa sociology as a discipline is it really helped me have that analytical thinking, para not just in report writing, but also in being critical of my position as a humanitarian staff, and yung position in how I conduct myself in the field, for example. So the good news is yes, makikita mo the application of some of the theories, pero hindi lahat. Of course, hindi lahat. But there are moments na madi-disillusion ka rin. Na bakit sabi sa aspiration ng sociology, ganito dapat, pero hindi siya nangyayari in the community. And I guess that's where we strive to do more, to do better. It's really an aspiration. It's a process naman. But yun, yung analytical thinking talaga, if you want to highlight that, for example, in a job interview, and saying that parang this is where you see your value as a sociology student, and you can really provide examples na, for example, in one of your internship, talagang nakatulong ka to do the report writing or yung mga ganong practical examples. I think that's one of the things that employers really value. I guess that's just a tip na pwede kong ibigay as someone working in the humanitarian sector.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pam. Meron pa po bang mga tanong? We are still accommodating questions regarding Ms. Pam's lecture. People here in Zoom, you may ask questions in the comment section. Okay. Ma'am, there is another question from the audience in Facebook. Despite calamities, were there positive impacts to the residents based on your observation?
Okay. Ayoko sana sagutin na yung resilience. I think it's 2022. Parang it's not something that we accept na. Of course, parang wala naman tayong choice but to be resilient in the face of these calamities. But the broader question again is parang what should we do para hindi na to ma-experience pa in the future? Of course, there's value in trying to understand ano kaya yung mga positive effects. But that would lead you to discussions around resilience. And I think a lot of you are familiar doon sa debates, di ba, that's happening online na hindi na dapat to about resiliency, pero parang we should be asking who's accountable for this. For example, when you talk about yung frequency ng disasters, why is it happening so frequent? Sino yung responsible for this? Yun, I'm sorry that I cannot provide like a specific example of a positive effect. But I want you to think about like, what is it, parang who is it, kumbaga parang the positive side of things. And isa rin yun sa skills ng sociology. So sometimes it's so hard to switch it off, no? Na parang, tignan na natin yung positive side. But it's so hard when you are in the field because you keep questioning, what can we do na hindi na to mangyari ulit, or parang who is responsible for this? Yun, sana I think when you are in a position na that you are employed, the positive side is a good starting point, but you have to like keep questioning positive for whom and for what, di ba? Yun.
Thank you, Ms. Pam, for answering that question. For those who are still want to send their questions, you may put it in the comment section here in Zoom and in the comment section in our Facebook Live. Any questions from our audience from Facebook Live? Questions from our Zoom participants? Is there anything you would like to ask to Ms. Pam? Ms. Pam, I would like to ask something. This is kind of personal, ma'am. What are your like personal benefits, ma'am, for volunteering for such activities?
Okay, so parang what I do, parang get personally from.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I guess it's still a profession. Of course, it is a profession, and yung profession ko kasi very important that it aligns with my values. So if it does align with my value, parang it really helps me as well personally. So maraming, kumbaga parang when you go then to the humanitarian sector, you have so many ideals. Diba parang isa sa mga considerations ko at the time when I was graduating is I want to gain experience in the field. Parang ganun. Kasi parang ang dami ko na natutunan in theory, in research, but how can I make sure that I apply it in the field, on the ground, my thinking, and also my experience. Kasi of course, what we read on sa mga research reports and academic articles, they can only provide us information based on their experience. But when you are there, you have that first-hand experience. Iba pa rin siya with in terms of how it strengthens your analytical thinking and your parang yun, yung profession mo then as a sociologist in the humanitarian sector. So.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Another question, ma'am, from our Facebook Live audience. In what way does the intervention of NGOs during disasters reduce the anxiety of the people when it comes to the distribution of aids?
Okay. Sorry, did I understand it correctly na you are asking kung paano na-reduce ng interventions yung anxiety ba? Tama ba?
Yes, ma'am. Opo.
Okay. Again, yung intervention in itself, it's something that is welcomed by the community, no? Parang if you are affected by a disaster, of course you want to recover as soon as possible. But yung question again is, ano yung mga structures in place to make sure na yung intervention na yon ay makakatulong talaga at hindi siya makakakos ng further harm dun sa community. So it's a double-edged sword, no? Hindi siya kasi pag inisip mo yung tulong, it's such a positive thing. But when you go to the community and you interact in that so-called interface, marami pala siyang layers, marami pala siyang dapat pagdaanan, and you have to really do it well. Kasi kapag if the intention is good but the practice is parang kind of problematic and questionable, then the intention of helping them hindi siya na-achieve kasi nag-aaway-away sila. So parang would you want that over, for example, a hygiene kit. Parang it's so important kasi for communities. And this is something that I also wanted to stress na even those small, but whatever type of tulong na gusto mong ibigay, kunyari hygiene kit or mga ano ba yun, mga kumot or mga sabon or whatever, ano siya malaking impact siya sa community na hindi sila makatanggap noon kasi bakit parang 'di ba that thinking na bakit ako na left out naapektuhan din naman ako ng ng bagyo. Parang so it leaves so much hurt to them that sometimes you wouldn't notice, no, na parang gusto ko na naman tumulong. So bakit parang may ganong pagbalik. So yun, very important to consider that kasi kahit yung mga maliliit na tulong like pagkain, tubig, kapag hindi siya nagawa ng maayos, it can really cause harm, emotional damage, no, lack of confidence ng communities. And talagang mag-aaway-aaway yan sila kasi, di ba, parang kumbaga sa isang barangay, doon may naiiwan kang 2 or 3 or ilan man. Yeah, it really rubs off that that pain and that confidence na wawala talaga.
Thank you, Ms. Pam. Another question po from our Facebook live audience. Ano po kaya yung dahilan kung bakit nadidelay yung mga tulong?
Yeah. Again, that's a good question. Number 1 is supply talaga. And also, sorry, that's not number 1. Number 1 is accessibility. Of course, when after a disaster, hindi yan talaga immediately accessible. So, I'll share my story, na parang recently my family was severely affected by Typhoon Odette. And my family's hometown is a coastal community. It's an island. Talagang it took some time before nakadating yung tulong kasi talagang yung connection between the island and the municipal proper nasira. So the accessibility part talaga is now mahirap i-resolve. And thankfully, yung family ko and yung relatives ko and our neighbors were helping each other out during those first 3 days, I think, na wala talaga silang tulong na nare-receive. Of course, anong gagawin mo sa first 3 days na yun, di ba? Parang there's the trauma, and then ang hirap kasi wala kang kuryente, walang connection. So you really have to rely on the community to parang maka-survive. Another issue is supply. And this is a very real issue, and that's why talagang important din yung connections ng humanitarian organizations because they can mobilize very quickly in the aftermath of a disaster because they have established these connections even before. So madali silang makakuha ng supply, i-make sure na ang tawag namin doon naka-preposition na yung supply. So for example, if this community is affected, saan yung nearest preposition goods natin nakatambak, kumbaga. Hindi naman in a bad way, pero parang saan yung storage natin, kumbaga yun yung tawag namin preposition yung item. So there are 2 issues, yung accessibility and then yung supply.
Sorry ba, magdami naming tanong. Kasi maraming curious na audiences about the topic, ma'am. With that, we have another question, ma'am. What are the criteria or qualifications that barangay officials use when it comes to choosing the persons who will conduct the survey?
You mean the survey? Hindi, that's something that humanitarian organizations do, no? Hindi yung barangay yung ano. So what happens is that humanitarian organizations would go to the community and then they will say, we have a surveyor po that will validate the list. It's not the other way around. It's the barangay official parang engaging with the surveyor. So important yun na distinction because again, if connected pa rin doon sa surveyor yung barangay official, then again, it's the assumption is that biased yan, kumbaga. The goal is to make sure that the process of selecting sino ba yung makatanggap ng tulong is transparent, it's inclusive, it's fair and just sa perspective ng communities.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pam. Another question, ma'am, from our Facebook Live audience. As a sociology graduate po, is it hard or what hardships have you encountered as you engage in the community?
Oh, okay. Ang dami. Ang dami in a sense that it's not easy then to be, kumbaga, you're a sociologist and a researcher, and there's only that limited thing that you can do. I remember, and I'm going to be very personal here. I remember when we were in Tacloban and we were speaking with the community affected communities, no, sa isang talagang na wipe out yung buong, ang daming namatay dun sa community na yon. And then I was reflecting na okay, tapos they were asking, so ma'am, para saan po yung yung research, no? So I can only say na, and we really had to be transparent na hindi po ito maapektuhan yung tulong na makukuha nyo, na parang it's not something na dahil na sumama kayo or parang talagang nagpa-unlock po kayo ng interview, eh, makukuha rin po kayo na tulong. But we will do our best to influence those decision makers or influencers na parang you really have to take into consideration the experiences of communities, no? But I guess yung personal reflection ko dun is I have to be transparent din dun sa kaya ko lang ibigay. And I guess at that time I was a fourth year sociology student, very idealistic, no? But reality hits you. Hindi pala yun ganun kadali. You really have to be transparent din sa kanila na research is really, the goal of the research is to facilitate that connection between influencers, decision makers, and the communities. But yun yung limitation of what we can do, I guess. But it should not discourage you, because being in that position, there's so much na parang opportunities for you to influence decision makers, and being able to listen to them. Parang I think at that time, they were also very thankful that there are people listening to them, kasi they also wanted to debrief the trauma, they wanted to tell their stories. So being that person who listens to them meant a lot for the communities. Yun. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Another question, Ms. Pam. Sorry, ang dami mong question.
But I have to leave in 10 minutes. So if you have any other questions, I'll chat my email address na lang.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Another last question, ma'am. May part po ba ng ibang institution other than the local government to help in coordinating with agencies during calamities?
Okay, so meron pa bang iba, no? Dito papasok yung sectoral groups in a barangay. Now, maraming organizations, 'di ba, in a community na active din and tumutulong din alongside the government. So, important din 'yun na important din 'yun na ma-recognize. Pero again, limited lang din naman yung kaya nilang gawin. But it doesn't mean na wala silang magagawa, because parang it's an act of parang I don't know how to describe it, but dahil nandoon sila, they can be another hand ng local government or local barangay para mas maabot pa yung mas madaming communities doon sa kanilang barangay, no? So parang tapping their networks, their capacity, na malaking tulong na in a post-disaster context, kasi overwhelmed talaga yung local government. You would imagine the extent of responsibility and the responsibility nila, no, na parang they have to coordinate with the local government, they have to coordinate with all those affected, tapos they are also, kumbaga, affected themselves, no? So yung tapping ng mga sectoral groups na yon, super helpful kasi nga limited yung capacity after a disaster. So I guess
Ma'am,
that,
Miss Pam,
yeah,
very last question, ma'am. I'm very sorry, ma'am.
no
Okay.
problem.
When you witness the aftermath in the communities in Tacloban, what is or what are the most important key takeaways that you got from the experiences po? From your experiences po, or from your experience?
Okay, that's a very Miss Universe question. Pero thank you for asking that. I guess at this point, ang dami. Parang as a researcher, I was really there absorbing everything as much as possible. Na parang ano yung kailangan ma-capture in a report or ano yung ano pa yung mga pwede naming isulat, parang being given that position na you are there to consult with communities. Yung takeaway ko doon is, ano ba, ang dami. Parang siguro yung pinaka-important for me, the communities themselves are parang are really wanting that opportunity to be heard and to be listened to. And sometimes, pakiramdam mo, di ba, parang it doesn't lead to anything or to change, not necessarily. But being able to be there to listen to them really helps. And also, one of my takeaways din, merong mga communities na ayaw na rin nilang pag-usapan yung nangyari. So, kahit na responsibilidad mo i-consult sila or kausapin sila, parang respecting that space na okay, ayaw na nila, it's not something that they want to discuss, no? Diba, baka mamaya kasi yung akala natin, pag pumunta ka sa community, welcome ka nila. It's not always the case. And you really have to respect that boundary, kumbaga, no? Kasi it's ultimately whatever we do, I guess the question that we should be asking is, gaano ka, yung paano ka pa makakatulong sa kanila, and if that means stepping back and giving them that space, and I think that's helpful na. Then.
Thank you, Ms. Pam. I think that ends our question and answer portion or our open forum. Let me pass the floor to our MC, Ms. Crisel.
Thank you, Ms. Pam, for accommodating the questions of our participants. And before we move on, I would like to invite everyone for a pictorial. So please turn on your camera as I take a photo of those who participated for this afternoon session. One, two, three. Okay, I am now on page 2. Please keep your cameras on. 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. Last. Again, thank you everyone. You may turn off your camera. And before we go, again, thank you, ma'am, and thank you to our participants who have sent their questions. Ma'am, would it be okay, last na lang po, would it be okay po to ask for a word of advice or encouragement for us, the graduating students of BA Sociology program, and to those po na hindi pa sure kung bakit po nila pinili yung sociology?
Wow, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give that advice. I wish I could say that it's all butterflies after graduation. But again, being a sociology student, you are equipped with all those theories and skills and knowledge, no, that you can really use wherever you are. I guess that's one of the strengths of the discipline, no? Parang hindi siya mauubusan ng paggagamitan talaga. Parang it's always something, there's always something that that is useful wherever you are, whether in the government, in the private sector, in humanitarian sector, or if you decide to teach, ang daming opportunities. And I think you really have to parang to remember that na as a sociology student, ang dami mong pwedeng offer to anyone who you will be working with in the future. And it's a matter of you knowing yourself, na parang what can I really offer? And also and knowing that because you have a lot of things to offer, there are also a lot of opportunities to learn kapag nandun ka na sa kumbaga outside world. I mean, parang it's mamimiss mo rin yung sociology classroom because there's in our classroom maraming opportunities to reflect and think. Sometimes in the workplace you don't have that opportunity to step back and to just think and reflect. So to cherish this moment is what I'm trying to say. That you are still in the classroom, you have that opportunity to learn and to discuss and reflect. Because once you are in the outside world na, sinasabi nila, parang, ano na yun, hustle after. Ayun, I hope that sociology is really useful for you, no? The same way that it is empowering for me. I really highlight that sociology background because sa humanitarian sector because it's a very interdisciplinary field, and really make sure that I bring with me those perspectives and skills na natutunan ko sa sociology as a discipline. Yun, I hope that was helpful. I can't assure you na madali after, but you have sociology as something that you can anchor, 'di ba? Na pwede mong gamitin as anchor. So hindi ka malulost kasi you are equipped with that. Yun.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you po. We will surely keep that in mind. And before we go, we would like to give you a certificate of appreciation as our simple token of gratitude for gracing us your time and effort. The certificate reads, University of Eastern Philippines, College of Arts and Communication, Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. This certificate of appreciation is presented to Pamela G. Combinido for sharing her expertise as the keynote speaker during the Pagpalawod sa Katilingban, diving into the depths of communities through the tenets of sociology, a webinar organized by the Senior BA Sociology students of University of Eastern Philippines, given this 11th day of March 2022 via Zoom. Signed, Liana Melissa E. De La Rosa, Professor, Internship, BA Sociology. Signed, Raisa LT, Program Coordinator, BA Sociology. Signed, Dr. Maria Alfe G. Banawis, Dean, College of Arts and Communication. Once again, let us all give our speaker, Ms. Pamela, a virtual round of applause.
Thanks also everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me. I also learned a lot from your questions. Super engaged students. Grabe, I'm really sure magagamit yung sociology. That's one thing that I'm sure of. Hindi ako sure kung ano yung magiging, parang saan kayo mapupunta. Pero yung sociology and its usefulness, that's one thing that I can really say na talagang magagamit nyo yan wherever you are.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Once again, to formally conclude, thank you po, ma'am. To formally conclude today's event, let us all welcome Mr. Paul Bertie Alegria, Faculty BA Sociology Program for the closing remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, we would like to thank our speakers for today's webinar, Sir Jail and Ma'am Pamela, for imparting your knowledge to us, especially to the students of BA Sociology. Today's theme, Pagpalawod sa Katilingban, diving into the depths of community through the tenets of sociology, gives us broader understanding of society. Like C. Wright Mill said, you can never understand the individual unless you understand also the society. We hope that the knowledge we gain from this webinar will be put to use for the betterment of our communities. Thank you again for our speakers, for the Sociological Society students who made this event possible, and all the teachers, alumni, and guests. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sir Paul. Announcement to our participants. The link for the evaluation and the attendance form for this afternoon session are now available in the chat section of the Zoom and in the comment section of our Facebook Live. Before we go, may we have Ma'am Raisa LT for the words of acknowledgement. Ma'am.
Yes. Hello. Thank you again, Miss Pam, for sharing your thoughts with us and to the participants. And Ma'am, special mention to Ma'am Ondet also.
Thank you, Miss Pam.
Thank you.
Salamat, Ma'am Ondet.
Salamat. Bye.
Once again, thank you to our dear lecturers, Sir Jail and Miss Pamela for joining us today. Also to the faculty members of the BA Sociology program, to our participants who joined us via Zoom as well as in Facebook Live, to the host of today's event, the Senior BA Sociology students, thank you and congratulations. That is all for today. I hope you guys have gained new learnings to which we could apply in the days ahead. This has been your host, Crisalan Mongkada, signing off.
Nasada nakislat sa ibang nga course.
Waray choice.
Diri ko aram akong course sa college.
Why sociology be your first choice?
It is a study about the world with the goal of improving people's lives, and it develops your
College of Arts and conquer soul. Gratitude and loyalty we pray. God's blessings be upon you. CAC ever true to your mission. We're always our inspiration. Omnia Veritas Vinci conquer soul. Omnia Veritas Vinci conquer soul.
Nasada naki-slot sa ibang nga course.
Waray choice.
Diri ko aram akon for sa college.
Why sociology be your first choice?
It is a study about the world with the goal of improving people's lives, and it develops your skills to understand everything around you. Here are the professions that you might partake as sociology graduate.
University of Eastern Philippines has the only BA Sociology program in Eastern Visayas. In UEP Sociological Society, we have faculty who support students to achieve success. We develop students who practices critical thinking and analyzation. We conduct surveys and do social experiments. We attend outside university seminars. We do not only study the social changes, we also work on it. We learn and we achieve. Make sociology your choice for a better future.